A motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Mark Polo, aye.
Adam Dash, aye.
Tom Caputo, aye. All right. So we are joined by Jessica, our Director of HR, who will summarize where we are and I think give us an opportunity also to have Chris, before we finalize the review, talk through the goals. So could you?
Absolutely. Jessica Porter, Human Resources Director for the town. So last time we met with the board, they conducted the performance evaluation for General Manager Christopher Roy. The final piece of that was to be concluded this evening with both the goal setting for the upcoming year, as well as set the compensation rate of pay for Mr. Roy. He is currently at $175,000 annually, so he would be looking for increase for the next cycle, which would, for him, would begin on May 1st of this year. So in the packets, you do have some goals that Mr. Roy has initially outlined as part of his performance review. These goals are obviously open for discussion between both the board and Mr. Roy. Either side may wish to add or amend any of these goals, and then hopefully we can get these finalized this evening.
I thought it might be good if Chris were to walk through at a very high level the 5 goals, just so that the community can hear them and we can comment if appropriate, although in general I think they look very good, and then we can finalize the review.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so as you see, so there are 5 goals, and the intent behind, or my thought process behind the goals were to anticipate alignment with a strategic plan. And so dovetailing with that sentiment, goal number 1 was release a strategic plan. And so with each of the subsequent goals, in the strategic plan, unless we go in a dramatically different direction, it should align with a number of the focus areas within that plan. So really that was the premise of number 1, is get this strategic plan finalized, get the process underway, and establish those focus areas to set the foundation for goal number 2, 3, 4, and 5. So in that vein, goal number 2, a big part, and I know strategic planning is to come, that discussion later today, but launching a formal public power awareness campaign highlighting Belmont Light customer-centric activities. That's a long-winded way of basically saying going out and increasing our marketing efforts to build awareness of our energy programming. We have a number of programs such as the traditional ones, the EVs, the efficiency, heat pumps. So those are some of the core marketing activities, but also get as part of that, to build, the more we're out there in front of folks, that we can build participation and thereby hopefully achieve greater success. But also in that same mechanism, explain to folks what we're doing on behalf of the community, touting our accomplishments, explaining, what we've achieved on our daily activities to better Belmont and move us forward. And so that's where, I think we can add additional formalized focus on that awareness campaign. So with that, moving to the next one, and I'm happy to add detail if you have any questions. Goal number 3, achieve a power supply portfolio containing 50% renewable resources. So that percentage I threw in there because, and you'll see a later goal is about budget. But when we were developing the budget and monitoring the Energy Committee's activities with the roadmap and the resolutions at town meeting and the climate action plan, internally, we thought this 50% renewable target would be a good mid-step milestone, and then we can adjust that as we see how these policies are adopted or implemented. We have the power supply policy. So this target is more aggressive than that power supply policy, so we could bring it to be compliant with the power supply policy, or vice versa. We could set this goal and then adjust the power supply policy accordingly. But I did want to point out there is that disconnect between that policy and this goal.
So where are we now, and where was the power supply policy set at?
So we're at 17, and the policy coming up, well, for this year is right around, we're on track. So 17, and then I believe I always remember 20 and 20. So I forget what the exact percentage is for 19. But through our budgeting process and our the renewable energy credit strategy and the power supply policy, our budget allows for 50%. And so.
What about the roadmap goals?
Roadmap goals, this is in accordance with the roadmap goals.
We're at 17, hoping to go to 50 in a year.
Correct. We
We currently have contracts for energy.
yes.
I mean, I think it's a noble goal. I mean, I support it, but is that achievable? Chris?
So that's the big part of that discussion is it would be a financial metric through trading of credits. So so the contracts are the
Got it.
actual
Understood.
slates.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
There's
no,
no
I think it's a great
reliability-
goal. Might as well try to shoot for the, aspirational
Yeah, it's
goal here, and
aspirational.
if we get close, that's great. But if
Sure.
we achieve up to 50% renewable energy, that's just wonderful.
Yep.
Could we ever get to 100% as a municipal light department?
Sure, I mean, with the rec market, again, being the financial mechanism to do so, yes.
What a
we
shining
can-
light that would be, huh?
we can
Because
do
then you
that.
wouldn't have worries of, supply,
Exactly.
supply, blackouts and stuff, because
What a great thing to advertise,
You're doing it
to
through regs.
communicate a message.
And, exactly, and it sets the foundation for electrification.
Right,
And so,
So, anyway.
related to longer-term goal setting, so the idea would be to go into this credit market financially to get these high-level percentages, and then gradually transition those to concrete contracts that are tied to actual generation facilities.
So if we were to get to 50, how much of that would be actual generation of renewables versus those that we achieve through RECs?
Got it. So a wind contract goes into effect this month, adds another %. So I'd say pushing 20% would be actual contracts, and then the other 30 is the credits.
you could probably get a higher, I mean, you're talking about just this coming year.
That's just this coming year, and
You
so,
could probably get it up to half, through actual
and
contracts.
coincidentally, I just received an email to explore 3 new renewable
Well,
opportunities
there you
down
go.
there.
So,
Great.
So that's the progress we're trying to make in that regard. Goal number 4, associated with that a bit, is release a formal budget book. So this will highlight in greater detail the FERC accounting line items that how we operate. So you'd be able to see how much, not just the financial statements, which put everything in the big buckets, but I think would be a useful tool to have that shows what do we spend on overhead maintenance? What do we spend on underground maintenance? What do we spend on renewable energy credits? And so it would be in accordance with FERC accounting standards that all utilities have to follow, as I'm sure you're aware. And so this, I find it to be a very useful tool for the utility, and so we just would formalize this as a book for
This
everyone
is the
to.
kind of book, Chris, I mean, maybe it's part of the strategic plan that, this board, the light board could be, say, here's the trends, here's
Yes.
comparisons to other MLPs.
That would be great.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a comparison, we get, because I think you've asked those questions, both of you, and I
Yes.
think we all have. We get this report out, we said, okay, that's great to get that report out, but we have no context.
Exactly.
Yes.
this will be just like a real corporation.
Well, no context, how's it trending, what's our
Exactly.
spend,
Yep.
I mean, it would be great to even do it for the budget for the town, but that's just so much more significant in nature.
Well,
to
this
get
is a
sort of
good-
trending,
this is a good
and
start.
comparisons, and
Yes.
Well, this
We
is a
have
good,
some
this
sense
is a
of
good
things.
pilot, and this is actually more of an entrepreneurial
yeah,
enterprise anyway.
forecast, what's the future look like,
Exactly.
where's our spend, a lot of our spend is salary and energy, of
Sure.
course, right?
Yep, those are big ones. And it helps ask questions. You'll see, you'd see in the budget at the beginning of the year, X number of dollars for overhead maintenance. And then when it's, 200,000 over, you can ask why, and then it's usually weather, that's why I picked it, that's a weather one. But you see office furniture, what'd you do, why is your office furniture what's that variance from?
I saw you redecorating your office. the other day.
Exactly, so,
Gold-plated, there's a gold-plated desk in there, but it was a little bit more spend than we were hoping for.
exactly. So that'll be in that budget book. We're well underway with our draft, if you'd like
I think
to
that'd
see
be
it.
wonderful for future boards to be able to sort of look at that type of thing.
So, but I expect that we'll be able to bring that for review in the next month or two. Goal number 5. So along these lines with the budget, one of the big things is the changing organization. So when was that? Maybe fall. We made some adjustments to our energy positions, and we added the energy specialist. And so with the system upgrades and supporting strategic electrification, there are other organizational position adjustments, I think, that are worthy of attention. So I didn't list them out here, but I went through the capital projects we're facing this year into next year. And so we're just trying to align, what do we do with our current work, internal workforce? Where do we need consulting help or outside contractual help? Now we're into not necessarily energy stuff as much because we have E&E, but this is back to the townwide system upgrade we're facing. I mean, that's a substantial amount of work, and and we have, I forget the exact count, 10 or 12 folks that have to go and touch every pole and manhole in the town. So there's that. There's been a substantial amount of development. So there's quite a bit of engineering burden that we're facing, and so that's where I think it's worthy of discussing. Not substantial. I know the resources I've been involved with in the past, so some of that comparisons to what our needs are. And then this ties in, I believe,
Chris, do we have performance evaluations for our personnel?
very quick. So they,
Very timely.
we've finalized, we've combined the form you used for me with some of the historical forms into one that I actually just started it today to look at rolling that out.
For all people,
For all.
personnel, even union employees.
Well, so, yeah, so I think we talked about it, so like the IBW folks, we certainly discussed that. But because the questions are different, I didn't bring a copy, but because they receive their assignments every day,
A little bit more,
it's less of, this incorporates a self-assessment, whereas if you're on the crew, the self-assessment is, I did what you assigned me to do that morning.
Well, I mean, but
So
there's a
we can do
level of performance there as
We
well,
could.
right? That you can maybe look at. I mean, I
Sure,
don't know
absolutely.
if the union that's an issue, and you have to get.
You
agreement
typically have to bargain
Yeah, that's
to
what I was
have
just gonna say.
performance reviews done.
But, something to think about for the town as well. I mean, at some point in time, we should be looking at all of our employees.
But at any rate, it's good to have a paper trail for some of these and have
Yeah,
it build
no,
up a,
agreed.
build up
Yeah,
a file.
job
and have-
descriptions and all of that incorporated here.
It was good to see this happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And good to see the cooperation between the town HR and the light department, because that hasn't always
Agreed.
been the case.
Yeah.
Um,
So, thank you, Chris. I think it's a great set of goals. Any other commentary from the
Yeah, I
board?
wanted to talk about two things.
Yeah.
Goal 1 says release a final strategic plan. Wouldn't it be more like get one adopted?
Oh, sure.
Because you've already released.
That's a
draft.
fair point.
That's fair.
That's a good point.
I think we want to, I mean, you're
Okay.
not adopting it, we're adopting it, but to,
Sure.
I don't know, foster adoption of a final strategic plan, something like that.
Well, and I would say almost through town meeting too, right? I mean, it's,
Where
there'll
did you
be
ask to
the Light
approve
Board
that?
Advisory Committee.
I thought
Board
we,
of
I
Selectmen.
don't think that.
We do. It's
I
not,
think
not
it's
a,
town
not a
meeting.
town
We
meeting.
won't take, you don't intend to take
No.
the town
I
meeting.
think you could present it to town meeting. You
Okay.
probably
We
should
don't
present
need
it to
adoption.
town meeting
No, I
unless
think
you
it
want
makes-
to, unless you want to get input before we adopt it, although I don't
No, I
know
don't
if you
think
may
we
be
need
done
to.
before town
So you
meeting.
think as long as the board?
I think we
Okay.
should present it. I mean, this is all good news stuff that we're talking about tonight. We should present it to
We
town
could run it
meeting.
by council and make sure that we're right on this, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure that.
I don't think town meeting needs to approve it.
It's just a strategic plan, but, the other part was, as a goal here, and I'm not gonna get ahead of ourselves on it because, but if we were to say, because we're later tonight, we're gonna be voting on the incinerator site, let's say we were to vote to put a solar farm there or something, I would think one of the goals would be to do that.
Sure.
I mean, so I can't, it's kind of awkward that we're having this meeting, they're having this meeting first and then that vote second.
Okay.
But, I mean, I don't want to miss out on it, and I don't want to have to redo all the goals. I mean, you could put in that pending approval, pending approval for a solar array to be installed in town. It doesn't have to be the incinerator.
Or
site.
storage.
Yeah, we could put it, or storage or somewhere else, right? That pending, installation or management of a solar or storage facility in town, that you would, as a goal, work on that.
Sure, we could do
That's
that.
not the
It's-
most formal way of saying it, but,
No,
It's out there, though.
because, there's the Chenery rooftop thing. I mean, it's not just the incinerator
okay,
site.
'cause-
So whatever these are,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be the high school, right? So all these solar things, so I'm not talking just the incinerator.
no, that's a good thought.
But they're all pending other things happening, so.
Town initiatives related to solar and battery store support and,
support,
I just wanna make it a
Promote,
goal number
yeah.
6 in here,
Okay.
however you wanna draft it.
sure.
that's a good thought.
So other than that, though, I thought that was fair enough.
So just on the strategic plan, presumably adopting it means we're executing on it as well, right? So we don't need to put that in here. We're adopting it, but it's also assumes that we're executing.
Within the plan are key performance indicators.
Okay, fine, thanks.
Okay, so thank you for going through that. With that, I think we can wrap up
have to
the
vote on the
review
goals?
process. I don't know, do we have to vote on the goals? I'm not sure we
I don't think you
do.
really need to vote on it. You will need to vote on the
I think we
compensation.
need to vote on the compensation.
Just asking.
So, in the executive session, we discussed appropriate salary adjustment. Jess, do you want to summarize where we are?
Sure. So essentially, Mr. Roy is at $175,000 annually, which covers the period May 14th of 2018 through April 30th, 2019. So whatever the board decides this evening will go into effect for Mr. Roy on May 1st of 2019. He has not received any increases since he's been with us. He did not get a standard COLA increase at this point, so whatever compensation is voted on by the board, we'll take that into account as well.
So the recommendation coming out of the discussion was to bear in mind a typical 2% COLA that we often see for Belmont Light as well as town employees. 2% COLA as a cost of living adjustment base, and then a performance-based increase of 2.5% is the recommendation.
For a total of
For
four.
a total of $182,875.
Which is 4.5%
Just
increase.
4.5% increase in aggregate. So,
I think it'd be helpful to just also comment for the viewing audience that Chris was kind enough to provide to us some salary ranges for municipal light plants, similar in nature, and that salary would put him just slightly above average, which I think is appropriate.
Which is, I think is, I mean, I think it's important, like you were talking earlier, Mark, about putting things in context, what the average being.
Close to 180, 179.
So we're-
So I think we're just a little bit over.
Which puts Chris in range,
Right.
so we're not, just so people can see what the range of this is.
So I move to provide a 4.5% merit increase to our general manager, Chris Roy, effective May 1st, 2019. That will run through April 30th, 2020.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chris.
We're glad to have you.
Oh,
It's been a great year, looking forward to another one.
Absolutely has been a great year.
All right.
Thank you, Jessica.
Let's keep moving. So, what we'd like to do now is invite the Light Board Advisory Committee to join us as we pick up on the discussion of the strategic plan from our last meeting. We've got several members
Got a
of the
quorum.
Light Board Advisory Committee. Actually, yeah,
Make some room.
We're only missing two.
that's great.
Just hit
Can
the
we,
button.
yeah.
Just hit the button.
So Steve,
Gentlemen.
we should probably do a quick introduction. Everyone should do an introduction, and then you may want to call your meeting to order.
Yes. This is Steve Clancy, Chair of the Light Board Advisory Committee. Seeing that we have a quorum, I'd like to call to order a meeting of the LBAC. And we have Ralph Jones, Travis Jones, Travis Frank,
got adopted.
Dave Beavers, and myself. Roy Epstein may be joining us later. The other two members are out of town tonight.
Okay, terrific. So as those may recall, we started a discussion of the strategic plan that General Manager Roy had presented to us. My understanding is in the ensuing weeks, you got some additional feedback from LBAC, some feedback from this body. This is a revised plan that you'll take us through with the goal of gathering additional feedback and hopefully some level of alignment around this going forward. Just in terms of timing, we do have one other thing on the agenda as well as the approval of minutes. So do we need to wrap this conversation up about 6:40? Does that give us enough time?
I think that, yeah, that should be sufficient. The antenna, yeah, we could probably get the antenna done in 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, so let's just make sure that we're cognizant, but that should give us a good 50, almost 50 minutes of, 45 minutes of discussion.
Sure. Okay, so I could start by go through a couple of the changes and then just highlighting I know we didn't get that far last time, so I figured once we hit the goals, I'll just dig in a little bit deeper into each of the goals and the metrics. So just as a very brief,
You're looking at the revised one now?
oh, with the revised, yes.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think we
the
had
one,
this, you left, you had it here. for us.
it was left. I have an extra copy if you need it too.
No, it's, got it.
So again, skipping over the overview in the background, we didn't change anything on slide 4 with the process, but I wanted to stop here for a minute just to highlight how we intended to drill down into starting at the overall big umbrella, the vision, and then drilling down to initiatives that will result in performance indicators to measure how we're doing. And so this slide helps just describe that, that approach. And so, and then the timeline is on the next slide. And, if you have any questions on the approach, a lot of this was informed by other strategic plans that have taken place, so.
Chris, could I just ask a overall question, big picture question, at least for me, which is, in the approach to plan development, we're anticipating hiring a consulting firm.
Yes.
Or maybe that's in process, for a significant amount of work. How does that play into what we have on paper here? In other words, we're engaging these people, but we've got some goals and other elements here.
Yes.
How do the two work together?
So, sure, so that's on slide 5 for reference. So the thought behind that is twofold. The strategic plan sets the umbrella for how we make decisions on a daily basis. And so that consultant, we're hoping will then help us make those, decide how to invest in the different initiatives, right? So if we have, say, just energy goals, for instance, there could be endless debate on what portfolio of solar investment do we make versus storage versus RECs versus incentives for electrification. And so the consultant develops climate algorithms and modeling for a number of institutions. And, well, the one we have been looking at, we would bid this out. But so it would take the inputs and then help highlight how we'd project and forecast, numbers on the KPIs. And so my thought on that was in the ideal world, the two happen simultaneously, and this is adopted soon enough to inform the modeling. But my opinion is we have to make those decisions today anyway. And so they don't have to be in step. But, when we run, we have our whole list of program incentives. And we have strategic electrification that's being discussed. So this modeling helps take that input. If we boost incentives on electrification, how do we think what's the resulting reduction in greenhouse gases? So we'd help quantify end results based on decisions we make today, without just assigning random values to rebates and incentives based on what we guesstimate.
So not to belabor the point, just to, part of the strategic plan here is to replace fossil fuel heating systems with heat pumps, electric heat pumps. Now, if is the consultant going to be looking at that? I mean, that's not, the consultant is going to be given this,
Exactly.
and they're not going to weigh in and say, wait a second, that's too modest a goal, or that's too aggressive a goal.
No, they'll give us the levers, we'll give them the levers to pull, and they'll create that magic box that tells us what happens when we pull the lever. And so, heat pumps, say, because we have a finite number of funds to create incentives. And so what we're hoping to do is then say, what's the optimum mix of initiatives to generate the greatest greenhouse gas initiatives? We could throw a scenario in there, what is the results in the lowest rates? What's the balance? Where's the bell curve? And so that's where this modeling helps determine the economics of our activities.
Travis Frank, I heard your question differently, but but I think you said no, it doesn't do that. Anyway, so what I want to know is it sounds like you're saying the consultants would allow you to figure out where to spend money best to
Yes.
get a reduction. And so if we had $10,000 to throw at heat pumps, and the goal in the strategic plan was a specific target of heat pumps, I think Steve's question was, would the consultant be able to tell us that $10,000 is sufficient to get us to the goal or not?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's...
Well, it's a complicated question.
But I think, is that more your
I
style
think-
question? Like, can we get to a specific goal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
I
to
mean,
that end, building on that, if the consultants were to look at it and say, but for another $10,000, you could get at 2.5x your goal for whatever reason of efficiency, I think that would be an interesting insight that we might not have in this process. Does the process give us enough flexibility when we have the input from the consultant to perhaps kind of adapt some of our goals?
Yes, well, that's where we haven't finalized, but we have a core RFP scope of services, and so that's the intent. And I guess it also helps add some substance to that sticky argument. Say I'm not saying this is remotely true, but say it says you shouldn't invest in heat pumps at all, put all your money in EVs. That could come out of the model, but, rather than it's just someone saying it, it says, here's the data points to support that argument. Or, for instance, historically speaking, it's been solar plus storage. How do you incent, when do you shift, right? Because up to now, right, solar incentives have been heavy and storage has not, there isn't as much funding. When do you shift the balance? And so if you put your end goal as maximum greenhouse gas reduction, how do we feed into that? What does that look like? And so that's the intent behind the consultant. But to get there, the hope is to have a guiding document that says these are our principles and beliefs and the goals that we're looking to set for the inputs.
So we might get to our goals in a different way than what we've listed here, but
Correct.
we're still looking to get to our goals.
Exactly. It'd be difficult for me to tell you, is it better to go after insulation or LED lighting? This adds an element of data to support those decisions. So that's that consultant. The RFP for modeling of energy initiatives. I know at the LBAC meeting, we had talked about some wording for that, but it's really to help guide decision-making to achieve the goals, and so which the goals we'll get to in a few slides.
Dave Beavers and Chris, I think we talked about it at LBAC. This is not a one-and-done thing. This is a model that your staff will be able to use and tweak and as time goes on and evolve.
Exactly, because as we see, the industry changes. Unlike not that long ago, the industry is changing rapidly, and so this would be a living model. And so it's feasible that goals would have to change in some way. But that's also why this is a 5-year plan. We look at it again in 5 years, or earlier. I mean, it's not set in stone, but generally speaking.
So on slide 5, you mentioned town meeting presentation. I presume you're talking about this May. Are you looking for a town meeting presentation this May, or? are you thinking-
Or fall, I think
Or
we
fall.
talked fall, this, back to, calling back to the goal-setting process, this was part of that awareness campaign. This is the strategic plan that, is guiding us now as a utility, as Belmont's utility. So I think the fall is really
Okay.
the earliest. We wouldn't be ready by May, June.
But there will be we are anticipating an energy committee presentation.
Well, yeah, well, they've got an article on the warrant.
Yeah.
Right?
Travis nods yes.
Yes, okay.
Fall makes sense.
But the driving force is all internal, so we wouldn't, we don't, there isn't any external driving factor that would that would necessitate rushing it. But I think that it sets reasonable targets for us to have a position for decision-making in 2020. And so, to slide 7.
Sorry, if I could,
Oh, yeah.
just, just specific about the town warrant. The Energy Committee is going to present the roadmap, which while they are very, very closely related, is different than the strategic plan presentation that Chris would be doing in the fall.
Well, I think that was Tom's
Okay, sorry,
point.
but
Yeah.
maybe I.
No,
Chris
I
said-
appreciate that clarification, but yes, that
Chris
was
said in
my
the
point.
fall, and then Tom said, yeah, but they'll be doing a presentation, won't they? And it's
But
like, yeah, 'cause you have an article.
about a slightly different thing, not.
Agreed,
this.
although I think it probably will be important for us to communicate to town meeting how these efforts are
Absolutely.
distinct, albeit coordinated.
One could mention that there's a strategic planning process ongoing.
Yeah.
And the hope would be in the fall, then it's clearly visible that we incorporated the roadmap sentiments and philosophies into this.
Yes.
So then, taking a step back, that was a kind of a dive into the initiative side, but taking a step back before we get there, slide 7, I think is an important slide because some of the things internally we'd like to do with the awareness campaign, but also for employees, is start to, show a vision. What's our vision? When folks, can we get something on the not the billboard, but the, display board that says, this is, when you come to work every day, this is the vision you're working towards. And so this slide, calling on the engineering background, is a mathematical equation, values plus industry trends, gets to the vision. We pulled our values, which I think are shared across many different industries. Also highlighting industry trends, things are changing. It wasn't that long ago in 2006-ish where it was an all requirements power supply contract. RECs didn't, they kind of exist, but you didn't really deal with RECs. You didn't deal with going out and getting power supply contracts. You signed on the line and you bought all your power and things were a lot simpler. But metering's changing, technologies, we're talking about controlling street lights from the office. Customer, with social media, a big one is customer expectations that we see where, that's one of the challenges we face as public power, where folks are used to dealing with Amazon and Google and Twitter, where you have massive call centers with people that are there around the clock. We have, 4 customer service folks, assuming they require sleep once in a while. And so, customer expectations, outages are not okay anymore, and folks want instantaneous updates. And so that all has to factor in how do we maintain a social media presence? How do we get instantaneous outage information to people? How do we shift away from the days where we actually had to call in an outage where, in today's world, it should just tell us. So those are what people are starting to expect, and those are the industry trends that we wanted to highlight through this.
Interesting.
And so that forms the vision. And so, that's our general overall statement. But all of it's a balance. So that's back to Steve's question about the consultant's help. And that is, what is that balance? Rather than try and navigate, what we think is the most beneficial, activities that we engage in on a daily basis. Let's put some data, let's put some modeling behind it. You know, they can come in with research from other parts of the country and help us determine what is that effective balance between you know, because there's that balance, right? Operational reliability, community service, environmental stewardship, and financial stability. Those are our big pillars that we need to balance to be successful.
The only new, I should note, the only new bullet point on this slide is under our values at the end, sustainability was added, it was not in the prior version.
Good addition there. So moving from vision, with that grand vision in mind, these are the 6 focus areas that we identified that will dictate goals, you know, so that was the intent behind some of the goal setting, is to pick some of these to focus on, you know, targeted goals, not just for myself, but also this will help shape goal setting for each of the employees on down the chain.
So you pulled off all the bullet points for the sections? It looks, it's a much cleaner graphic.
Yes, so one of the very consistent points of feedback were, what are all those lines and word, you know, and descriptions? And so we spent some time trying to figure out how to make it more clear.
You
but
did
it was just confusing. The description in the old version was intended to help identify why those focus areas were chosen. But we thought, because there will be a associated report with this that adds detail, we could just go in through the report.
It's a slideshow, it's not a report, yeah.
I think, so we just took it
I
out.
think that's wise.
So those are the six pillars, if you will, that drive the goals that you'll see in a minute. But each of them helps that balancing act of, in the vision statement. So moving to goals, as you'll see, slide 11 starts goal number 1. So this is where we hit the operational resilience. And some of the intent is to also show in some of these areas we're doing well. So perhaps we don't have to necessarily make changes or do anything differently, but it is used to emphasize that it's an important part of our business. So some of the formatting, you'll see the targets are on the left. So those are the targets, and these are the initiatives that we've identified that we need to, the initiatives then drive our activities. So activities aren't on here. That's what I would consider part of, say, the budget discussion, where the activities are what we assign the crews to. So those aren't listed. You know, as the strategic plan, we tried to keep it higher level. The activities would be, you know, such solar project development, you know, that could be in the goal setting for employees. So here it's the targets and the initiatives that will help achieve these targets. And then the blue to the right is where we are today, so we know where we're starting.
Yeah, I know this came up at the LBAC meeting when I was there, that one of the reasons you saw these on the old one, it just had 15, 16, 17 in average. And the problem was 17 was all out of whack because we had all those planned outages when we were switching over the substations. So it looked like we were losing all this power
Yes.
when in fact that wasn't the case.
Yep.
And we also had 2018 numbers, and this was just showing through 17. So the idea was to go back to 15, to go all the way up to 18 to show that it had that 1 year pop up and then it went back down to normal.
Yes.
So it got a little more busy than I was expecting to add those lines in there, but I think that's kind of important because otherwise it's really misleading. So it looks like we have this really bad trend, which isn't true.
Higher number for CAIDI is not good. That's
Average outage time per customer, yeah, that's not good.
So that,
It's the new term for me, yeah.
yeah, that's,
They're all defined right.
Yeah, no, I'm reading it,
Lower
I
is
just wanted
better.
him to just spend 1 minute
Yeah,
on it.
fewer outages is better, but
How is that measured? How do we measure that?
so, sorry.
No, how do we measure it?
Okay, that's a great question. So that's one of the things that not listed on here are the activities. And so I would say the answer to that question, I'd categorize as an activity. And so we have this smart metering system. So to hit the answer first, today, we receive calls, we log calls, and so we know when an outage started, and then when it's restored, we know when it ended. So we manually upload it into this program called E-Reliability Tracker. And so that E-Reliability software platform tracks our outage information. And so back to the prior comment I made, we have smart meters. And so one of the things, activities that I've been talking with our operational folks about is, can we get those smart meters now, when the power goes out, send not only us an alert, but send the account holder an alert? And then it's restored, same thing, send the alerts back. You know, that's where we are today. So those are activities, those aren't in the scope of this document, but that'll help with the reporting, because the manual reporting isn't super precise.
It should also be noted for the public that our SAIDI, which is average total outage time per customer per year, our Belmont 4-year average is like, way, way less than other munis or investor-owned utilities. And then you go to our SAFE, the average outage frequency per customer, we're like a third of investor-owned utilities and like half of municipal utilities. I mean, our outages are way lower than the other
Even as it relates
munis
to
and other.
munis in the Northeast and IOUs.
Yeah, I mean, we are way below the Verizons and.
But your aspiration is to be-
The Eversources of the world and National Grids, and we are way better than the other municipal-owned utilities. We're really, really good with reliability. That's
With all of that, you.
hence the award.
Katie, hope to be lower, 90 to 120, right?
So Katie,
2025,
correct,
I'm looking at this correctly.
yes,
Safi rating 0.05.
Keep in mind, our Belmont 4-year average included the year we had all those planned outages.
Yeah.
So it's an artificially even
Okay.
higher than it should be number.
and Katie is one of those things, it's,
Average
as again, no-
interruption duration index.
exactly, no comparison's perfect, but what you'd find with Katie,
For affected customer per event.
and this, you can see it through these numbers if you, so overhead, it'll take 2 minutes to go through this. Overhead is a lot easier to fix, but breaks a lot more. Obviously, it's exposed to car accidents, lightning, weather, trees, all that stuff. So you'd see your safety is going to be higher, right? Because you're going to have more outages on an overhead system. And therefore, your duration could be higher because you have more frequent outages, but your customer duration will be lower because your response time can be faster. Whereas
On overhead.
overhead,
Above ground.
correct. So
Okay.
whereas
Interesting.
if on an underground system, which we're very heavy underground, your durations are going to be higher because it's much harder to troubleshoot underground, but your safety is going to be far
And then do a dig,
less.
get a permit to do a dig. and-
But it's less likely to go down, but when it
Exactly.
does go down, it's harder to fix it.
Right.
So that's why our numbers are slightly higher, because we are a higher
Interesting.
percentage underground
Okay.
than most.
Fascinating.
You really took a lot of the stuff from the LBAC meeting to heart in there. I think these slides really reflect a lot of, I should say LBAC spent
Good
about
stuff.
2 hours going through this in painful detail. Necessary, but painful detail, like word by word on these slides.
Which we thank you for. One quick question on the initiatives. So the initiatives, I love the targets, I love the context. The initiatives feel a bit light in terms of just description, and
Okay.
I imagine people may want more on that. Is there a further iteration where you kind of flesh these out? Or is this as deep as you plan to go on the initiatives at this stage?
So, I mean, admittedly, I was just erring on the side of brief because it was the presentation. We
Yep.
can add more, certainly, but that's where, with the report, it'll answer what is enterprise risk management.
Well, I should note the prior version had an extra bullet point that said drive utility innovation, which is now off.
Oh, yeah, I took,
Well, when you have a
Right.
plan here, to Tom's point, so we say infrastructure investment, would we have a plan of what that might look like? Right, I mean, should we lay out what your infrastructure investment you think needs to be in order to maintain operational resilience?
yes. So,
Right, I mean, sort of the plan plus the.
Is that the activities section of the plan? I'm trying to figure out how this evolves, because I could see someone looking at this and saying, yes, this is great, these initiatives, I don't quite know what that means. What are you actually planning to do?
okay, so for infrastructure investment, I guess the qualifiers, I'm happy to change anything. So infrastructure
I
investment.
don't think on the slide is necessary, but I think what Tom is saying, what I'm saying is that understanding what that just sort of term, I mean, anyone can say infrastructure investment, what does that mean? What's
Yep.
our spend? Where do we need to invest? Maybe you don't know that yet, because you've only been here a year, but looking at all of that to ensure that we meet our KPI of.
You can say that when
2025.
you've got the slide up there. And then
Yeah,
you-
right.
Yeah,
So here's
I
the
think it's
plan,
not-
this is what we're looking to do, this is what we're
I
doing.
mean, it's a slide, it's not a transcript.
And I'm looking for it
Am I
less
putting words in
right
your mouth,
here.
Chris? Because to me, I'd want to say, okay, great, in order to get to our KPI in 2025 of what you've just stated here, we believe that we need to have this type of infrastructure investment over the next 5 years.
I think it's important to note, this is not the strategic plan. This is a slideshow presenting it. There will be an actual document that goes with
And I
it.
think maybe that's what it is. Maybe what you're saying is there's a report, there's a document that will flesh out each of these.
Right.
When you present them, you can put color against each of these at a very high level so that people have more context, and anyone interested in going deeper will be able to reference the document.
Exactly. I mean, it could be a 4-hour presentation if we added it. But I guess the big thing for me was,
Might be anyway.
I mean, I could easily.
4 hours, yeah.
I'd love to do that.
It's a lot going on in here.
But the premise I was,
Yeah, in half an hour, so.
with the vision and the focus areas, those ones were the big ones for me, because if those dramatically changed, those would change the goals. But the activities for infrastructure investment, again, we know we have a circuit that performs worse than others. So in 2020, that could be an activity. But once that's done, we'd have a different activity in 2021. So those change much more.
But the initiative should remain constant year to year.
constant.
Okay. I think that's great. I think, again, having more detail in the pros in the report will probably help flesh those out, which is great.
So that's the operational side. So customer satisfaction, tying in a little bit about changing customer expectations is a big one. And so focus area, you'll see customer experience. And so with upgrades happening and unplanned outages, planned outages, just lots of activity going on, recs or rate changes, how customers are plugged in now more than ever. And so we had to make a goal around customer satisfaction because we want to make sure everyone's happy. And so fortunately, we've been quite good over the years. And so, again, this is another one of those targets where the KPI, 93 to 95 is where we find a pretty comfortable niche for high-performing municipal utilities. And so we receive this information through our customer surveys that we do every other year. And so we'd like to make sure to maintain the 93 to 95. That ebbs and flows as when we change out. Bad weather is a big one, but when we change out platforms, to make improvements, you always see a little bit of dip in customer satisfaction, but then it comes back up. So that's why we added the range. And 94, as you saw in 2017, is right in there. So this is just solidifying this as a focus area for us.
We're doing that again this year?
Yes, 2019.
So the only major change on this slide is under the 2025 KPI target. It used to have it said 100% renewable power supply by 2022, and now it just says work toward 100% renewable supply without a date. Because I think we talked about this at LBAC,
we
about
on
not
2 or
setting
3?
up some
Oh, we're on 2.
unachievable goal, because
You looking at
that,
3 or 2, young man?
That's on
Right here.
page 13.
Okay, yeah, we were looking at, I think we're finishing up 2.
Sorry,
Yeah,
we just finished. But then, so that's for 3. Anyway, so just, that summary of 2 was, we're good there. There's not too much to add. But then goal 3, exactly.
So work towards rather than achieve? Is that the point?
well, no,
you're
they
making?
took the date out.
We took the
It said
date.
by 2022, but
Yes.
this, I mean, you don't need to tie it to something that specific at this point. We're going to have the roadmap or whatever we're going to have.
Okay.
Exactly.
But I did think, Chris, and I get that, I didn't remember that from our discussion, that we wanted to take the date away. Was that part of the discussion? or- Okay.
I thought it was fine.
What's the resolution say?
so.
Sorry?
What's the resolution going to say?
The resolution has language of, the town meeting warrant basically is something on the order of, we endorse that Belmont Light or the town move toward 100% renewable, and I believe it does have a year. Maybe
2022?
it references as in the roadmap, which does have a year.
Could we just say here, consistent with the roadmap?
If we adopted it.
So.
Right. So I suppose if we don't, it's problematic, but I wonder if we just sort of acknowledge that we're not gonna put something in here, but it will just work consistent with the
I
roadmap.
think that's why it's better to leave it open-ended. I mean, if we have a roadmap and we have the climate action plan, we have dates. It doesn't have to
I just
be
was
here.
curious as to what the resolution, non-binding.
You'll meet the goals of the roadmap and the climate action plan, period.
If I could add a thought to that, because we have the power supply policy, and so the power supply policy
Well, that, yeah.
is set So we're working towards it. In this document, the power supply policy would then match whatever comes of a roadmap or a town meeting vote.
I think renewable, 100% renewable in like less than 3 years is probably asking a lot, but
But I mean,
asking a lot.
Well, what's the roadmap gonna
but-
say?
So,
I don't think it's 2022, is it?
Right.
But this really just requires us buying RECs. It doesn't require us entering into any portfolio contracts or anything. So it's just a question of what the market price of RECs are and how fast you want to get to 100%.
And you
by
don't- But you
coverage.
don't know what the number's going to be.
Right.
Yeah, the market price could change for RECs, although Dave would probably know
I
better
mean, this is
than I would.
aspirational, I understand, so, but it's still.
This, right, and this speaks to me as we're working towards it. Maybe we slow it down if the market goes out of whack, or if it looks more favorable, we'll increase it.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we slow down, I'm just trying to maintain flexibility should outside forces
well,
require.
right, but there has to be somewhat of a balance because we can't, I mean, you know, our budget we can't bust our budget and increase rates dramatically. I mean, I think he's suggesting that, and we're working towards it, but the RECs become so expensive, I mean, we have to raise rates to support that, and I'm not certain that, significantly raise rates.
Sure.
I'm certain that's the
And
balance
let
we
me,
want to achieve here.
let me just ask one more question here, which is, you also have decarbonized power portfolio. To some extent, when we buy enough RECs to cover all our usage, we are considered to be a green supplier, a green energy entity. And so that, to me, begs the question a little bit about how much you want to engage in, how quickly and how rapidly you want to engage in the decarbonation of your actual power supply portfolio. So I don't know if there's any, I just wanted to raise that. I don't know if anybody has any, comment about that. But I do think that you are considered to be, company or entity, communities that go 100% green via RECs. They're 100%, they're as green as they get. And certainly we've always been in favor of increasing the renewable power supply portfolio. But there may be a tension there between the cost of doing that when you're already meeting your green obligations otherwise.
One thought on that is, hypothetically, if we were doing 100% because we purchased a lot of RECs, there's now the fiscal calculus about evaluating a new direct renewable contract would be different, because at some point we would buy, we wouldn't have to buy those RECs. So in other words, we would be avoiding the purchase of the REC costs if they were bundled in the contract, which I'm just saying, like, there could just be a natural, as we move forward and evaluate contracts, there could just be, what's the final purchase price of, of buying grid power plus a REC versus a wind contract. You could just relatively easily.
Yeah, when you look at it from that perspective, is it better to be actual, as Tom indicated earlier, or is it get there by RECs, or both? Right, I mean,
We've had a lot of vigorous discussion, and we will continue to have this discussion for a while.
I think that is a big argument in the field.
that is a big argument in the field?
I would suggest you need to be flexible in the future, because this is still kind of all getting worked out.
Yeah, I'm not saying we shouldn't be, I'm just asking the question generally, what's better to be?
Personally, I feel if there's actually longer-term contracts, it's also renewable energy gives you for 10 years, and you can lock in a price at a reasonable, both
that's
your
better.
energy and your RECs. To me,
Right.
then you know your future. It's like, what's my price in 5 years? Well, I know it exactly. I don't have to worry about the markets, but
Okay.
that's developing.
Helpful.
But just quickly on the price of RECs, where they're at now, I think 100% is certainly within target.
Good. Well, I mean, we're not trying to get off the goal. I just want to preserve flexibility
Within
should
target
something
by when?
go
What date?
sideways, but otherwise, we're barreling right
Within
ahead.
target based on 2025 KPI or sooner? It's within target range.
It's how much you want to pay, right? And one test I have is the coffee test. If customers would pay, one Starbucks extra per month, then, most
I
people
think
probably
that's the
go for
balance
that
I
for
talked
green
about.
energy, right?
How much
that's-
more?
Is that a
All are
is that a
venti-
latte?
This-
or-
Well, there's a good question.
This
there.
board
That's
has to
worked out.
look at that along with, sort of our
Sure.
budget for the town and other matters, so that's sort of the balance there, right? I mean, not just raising rates, it's the other considerations that we have to say on the other side,
Sure.
town perspective. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so tied to goal 3 is goal 4. So promote community-wide strategic electrification. And so this, since we've talked of the roadmap, this was intentionally pulled from that document, again, to show the coordination between the two. So should, those policies be adopted in the spring, and then we present on this in the fall, there should be a very noticeable consistency between the two. And so from the LBAC discussion, I think perhaps the board discussion last time, we changed this to be more clear that it's, Belmont Light alone can't get all EVs changed in town. We're supporting as best we can a collective effort by the community.
This is more explanatory. Other than that, the slides are pretty much identical from before. Although Roy's idea of taking the pennies out of the.
I mean, I think people are
chart.
moving towards EVs as sort of the battery aspects of them and where you charge them over time, right?
Right.
But this is based on the community. I guess we could support that effort.
Exactly.
Would it be supported by having more charging stations in town? I think I asked this last time.
It would be nice.
Other than the one in the Claflin Street lot?
That would be nice.
We,
I was gonna say, when we first put them in, you hardly ever saw them. And now that I try to plug in over there, they're frequently full. I mean, it's good to see.
You drive an EV?
Yeah.
Good for you.
And so along these lines, to tie back in activities and my sense, or my thought where the activities fall in there, that's the exact point. So we have this as a goal. We just were looking at filing for grant money for 2 more charging stations for Cushing.
Let's do it.
Awesome, yeah, that'd be great.
So those types
To
of.
go in the new garage under the building.
Underneath, that's a little bit less transparent, but yeah, I mean,
Well,
yeah.
it doesn't matter. I
Other
mean,
parts of town.
Other parts of
Waverly
town.
Square.
EV drivers know where they are.
Oh, the charge point tells you right where they are.
Right.
What's that?
Charge point tells you right where they are. And you get to park like almost by the handicap spaces usually. Wherever you go, it's great parking.
But this is where the incentives and the rebates come into play. How can these are personal decisions being made by the community at large, so how can we?
We can
incent-
provide rebates for them to purchase an EV.
Exactly.
Right, got
How
it.
can we drive people to behave in accordance with the,
And
Those
thi-
slides are almost identical from.
And this is what ties in most directly to the roadmap,
yes.
because these are the key elements in the roadmap that are anticipated to be able to drive down our carbon footprint.
Exactly.
And just to quickly say, as the sort of energy committee representative, at least, the roadmap is really about looking at the town-wide emissions, which come from a variety of places, and how it directly ties in and why it's in the Belmont Light strategic plan is so much of this is focused on strategic electrification, moving from oil, which is not Belmont's light domain, but moving into electricity, which we can clean up more easily. And the Energy Committee is really excited that Belmont Light has been so supportive of past campaigns, and we're looking forward and very active on a variety of new campaigns and outreach and to support the goals that are listed in this document.
Cool.
That's great.
And I think, Travis, you have to look at the roadmap in the context of what we discussed today, which is, it's aspirational, but it's probably a little more than aspirational, but it's not something that's etched in stone.
Yeah, and it's doing, the roadmaps, one of the purposes of the roadmap is doing what we're having here, which is really getting the community to discuss actions and directions, and can we get there, and what would it take?
It's great.
Okay, so then I can.
Goal
move to-
6.
Oh,
5.
5?
The slide hasn't changed from last time.
Well, I mean, we didn't go through
But we didn't
this.
actually talk it all the way through, yeah.
We sort of deferred, I mean, you can go quickly, we won't ask any more questions. We got 8 minutes.
I went through this with the LBAC, maybe I'm just burned out.
Yeah, you've been through it already once, yeah.
So again, in that, the same thought process of balancing all of these things, right? Because the entire goals come with rate impact. Well, Goal 5 addresses the business resilience. And so there are other KPIs to pick from, but the big one we picked that we thought might encompass everything is the rate of return. And so in the current situation, you'll see our rates of return for the last 5 years. And so as we look at adopting more distributed generation and more distributed resources, demand-side management, the key driving factor for how our business is doing is, are we actually in the right area on the funding? And so 2 to 3% is something we pick because that's a number I'm familiar with. The DPU allows us to go to 8. But 2 to 3 in my opinion, has been a pretty sound place to be while not having rates too high that what are you going to do with the extra, say, 5% in there? So it's that balance between keeping money in people's pockets versus making sure the business is stable.
And that's higher than we've seen in the last 5 years, or
Slightly higher.
four out of the 5
Yes.
years. So the expectation
Close.
is that you'll have to make some changes in order to get there.
Exactly. It's not a lot, but it's a goal, yeah.
Well, we do have that rate increase. I don't know if that's
We
gonna
have the
affect-
2%
that
rate
should
increase.
affect some of these numbers.
Should help a little bit.
16, 2.1, what was, I don't remember.
Had to do with the substation?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay, anyway.
So that was 5. Goal 6.
There we go.
So this ties in with the public power awareness campaign. So with everything, again, in the prior goals, goal 6 is, well, let's tell everyone about it. And toot our own horn a little bit. And so this ties in, the KPIs tie in with some of the customer survey metrics. So there is a survey question about rate appropriateness. That's what the best way we could say for value. Are we providing a good value? And so that's where we'd like to be, providing good value. So we added in the second KPI for governance structure. That is because there's so much going on. The other survey showed people weren't really, that to me says, where do we go if we want to talk about rates? What is a rate hearing? So if all this stuff is going on, we read about it in the paper, where do we go to voice our comments? And so that's where bullet point number 2 talks to, well, this is who you speak to. And then bullet 3 is the 50th percentile ranking in meme customer survey. So that's where we have an indicator that shows we have some work to do. Noteworthy, we didn't put it in here, only 12 responded to that meme customer survey, but of the 12, there's a number of categories, but in the overall ranking, we're in the bottom 25th currently. In comparison to those peers, we'd like to bump that up to double.
When do we do surveys? Like once a year? Or?
So we do surveys every other year, and then meme, I believe, is also the same schedule every other year.
The governance one is the one here that I understand the motivation. Given where we are now and where you aspire to be, that could be a lot of work
Sure.
to educate, and I just wonder whether or not that is the most important work of,
Sure.
Belmont Light versus other things.
Yep.
So I don't know if LBAC discussed this, but that was the one I kind of looked at and said, I get it, but I don't,
Adjust it.
I'm not sure that's as important, or maybe you adjust it down to be something that is easier to attain without having to kind of initiate Herculean efforts.
Is this just the current governance structure, or is this sort of tied into a discussion of a potential future governance structure?
My intent was to leave it independent of that. It's just,
Okay.
the sense is, where do I go essentially to complain about rates?
Yeah, I mean, well, they call you up, but.
Yeah.
We want to make sure people don't think this is like an initiative is to change the.
No, that's
whole-
right. I just wondered, based on
Department.
what Tom just said, how many people really care about that,
Right.
that much.
No, we could,
I don't know, I think it's helpful for them to understand that it's the light board that actually approves rates,
sure.
and we're the light board.
Considering that in the last survey, like 40% of the people realized that and the other 60 did not.
But I
Well,
would
yeah.
rather us sending mailings out to people's homes talking
Yes, we
about
would-
EV programs and
Rather than say,
strategic
hey, guess what?
electrification,
The
rather
light
than
board
like,
is
do
the
you know how
government."
your light board works?
It's not the light board yet.
Just don't know that anyone's really.
Point.
Here's Tom and Adam's phone number, call them.
They already do, there's no reason.
Yes, fair.
On surveys, what we do at Ryan is, on every invoice we send out, we have sort of a link to fill out a performance evaluation or client service, evaluation. And I don't know whether when you send out bills, you could have some kind of you can go to this website to say, how are we doing, So that way it's not every 2 years. And people, but when you do that, you're probably going to your self-selection, force feed just complaints. That's okay, because.
I'd rather hear than not hear.
Yeah,
to be
because I
honest with
think, we say that we rather, if we're going to be in the business of serving clients, then we need to ask them how we're doing.
Sure.
And so this is kind of the same
you.
thing.
Perhaps there could be some kind of like electronic box or some sort of mechanism whereby people could register their complaints without having to call us, because some of these people are intimidated.
Well,
to
you give them a
call.
link and say, okay, here, if you have any questions or concerns, or you want to provide feedback, go to this website.
Sure,
I mean,
and
Just
that
a
might be-
thought.
That might be something to replace that sort of the decision-making governance is a little vague, maybe it'd be to
a thought.
provide, electronic feedback for customers or some sort of venue for that. I don't know what the
Yeah.
wording would be.
Yeah, sometimes when you ask customers or
People would care
clients
about
how you're
that.
doing.
Yeah, I would care more about
Even-
that than whether or not they know how the structure of the.
Right.
of the
When you
governance
ask
works.
clients, we find that when we ask clients how we're doing, we have a tendency to have client service evaluations that are higher because they appreciate the fact that we're actually interested in how we're performing.
What's like a complaint box / suggestion box, some electronic version of it?
I won't call it complaints, just feedback box.
There you go.
Provide us thoughts,
Feedback box.
concerns, and I think folks would feel, hey, you're really asking us what we think and how we feel, and you might just get a handful.
And along those lines, then I almost wonder if the KPI is about some mechanism of capturing customer feedback and input.
yep.
And
Right.
that's kind of the metric of
Thought,
whether or
Chris,
not.
to weigh you down on this, but you could
That
have
would be
someone
effective.
within the department sort of monitor that, and if there's a trend, you can bring that to the light board or try to address it,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's better. I think that's a clearer bullet point. Okay.
All right, Chris, we've got 2 minutes.
Goal 7.
We're on the last slide.
Last one, pretty much. Goal 7, prioritize
Zero.
investment in Belmont.
Turnover? Are you really serious about that?
Well, no, this was the one that we talked, we had a big conversation about this.
Zero turnover.
Well, no,
Love
it
that.
it had been 100% employee retention, and then Roy had pointed out you don't want 100% employee retention, because
Yes.
people do retire, you don't want people to
No matter
think they
what.
get a job no matter what
No matter how
they
they
do.
perform, you want to
So
retain them.
this is like, you're not gonna lose people to competing utilities is different.
Well, that's kind of a high.
That's people not poaching our employees.
That's a significant retention or turnover goal. I mean, what's been our turnover percentage? Probably low. You don't hear about a lot of turnover.
Well, I admit, I was a little surprised. So the current situation, the last 5 years, 10 non-retirements. So this was.
10?
10 folks
Out of how many?
out of 30.
Well, that's pretty significant.
Well, that's why this is a goal, a KPI, because this has to stop.
That's almost 35% turnover.
But we should put
In 5
goals that
years.
are achievable.
I get
It's
that.
2 per year, 2 out of 30.
Well, that's why it says limit. Well, limit, you could just say take this 2-0 per year
10%
out and
a
just
year.
say limit employee turnover to competing
Yeah.
Small
utilities.
department
would be
like us-
better.
like us.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, you're never gonna get it to
You're never gonna
zero.
get to
Well,
zero.
I mean, frankly, there was a lot of, sort of back in, during those years, I don't know, since 2014, there's been a lot of.
Things have changed, but
There's been
still.
there's been some turmoil in terms of the, is that understatement, Steve?
Yes, it is.
Hiring a new job.
Belmont Light is a good place to
Yeah.
work now.
Good thing Palillo's leaving the light board, because it's been a disaster since 14.
It's been good for the last couple of
What
years.
it's like now, 30% turnover rate.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that's a great aspiration. I think zero is kind of a high number,
Yeah.
or low number, or whatever you
Talk
want
to
to
the
call
voters
it.
about that one.
God bless you for wanting to do that, but that's going to be pretty, I'd say 2 to 5%, and I don't know, 1%, I don't know. Zero's fine if you want
I
to
think
put
you
it
just
on
take the
there.
number out. The idea is to limit your turnover to competing
limit.
utilities.
That's
I don't,
right.
the number's gonna be
Limit it,
whatever the
yes.
number's gonna be, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, well, I don't want to get into, we're losing time here, but you can get to a point where you want zero, and then you end up saying, no, please stay, and we'll double your salary. That's not what we want to do.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So there is some change on this chart here on, is the EV. We talked about this at LBAC, because like some of the numbers were percents and some were whole numbers. They didn't really match. So you look on the EV thing now, it's gone from like number of EVs to percentages, because it
Color
now
code.
matches the other parts of the
Color code
chart.
is nice.
And then at the bottom, the workforce culture still says 0 employee losses, so you could say.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Like limit employee losses.
Yep.
I mean, the middle part of the first two columns, goals and initiatives, I think we've kind of gone over. This is just a summary.
These are really summaries of what we saw.
Yeah, so all we talked about at LBAC was sort of making, when it said, like here, it said numbers, then percent, that'd all be
Yes.
percent in the green.
Very nicely done.
Yep. That's great.
And,
Right.
Got it, got all these.
and
The
then,
changes in the other slides all reflect, end up getting bumped into here. So.
so the next steps, I think, actually, it was helpful that we talked about the consulting services. So the two things, the most concise way I'm looking at next steps is, it seems like this is a good document to go with, so we'll create a more in-depth report that covers a lot of the details that we just discussed that people can refer back to. And we'll continue on with building our RFP document for the consultants. And so, once we have our detailed report, then we can circulate it for feedback, or, we can bring it to the next meeting. And I don't think the report will be ready, but we can discuss how you'd like to review it, I guess. But I think the next step for me is to get this detailed report that adds a lot of substance to what's in here, and finish that document for one final review.
And you're preparing that not for next month's meeting, but perhaps the following?
I think it'd be the following, because we also want to time it, because in there is that budget we've been talking about, so we'd like to make time for that, and so,
So then the light board would just adopt a strategic plan, is that the plan?
yeah, we could do a formal slideshow, things like that.
Yeah, because you did talk about a community input phase here as
Oh,
well.
well, yes.
There's gonna have to
So,
be.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, what I'm questioning. So before
Yes.
we adopted, there'd be, imagine, community input, you'd want the
Yes.
plan completed and community.
Exactly.
Hence not Springtown meeting.
Agreed. Would it also, you would end up hitting the summer too, which will be tricky, because it's harder to do things in the summer.
That's a good point.
But we've done it.
Yeah, I wouldn't, yeah. So Tom, you're looking to get input on the plan from the community, then the board would adopt this
That's what I was thinking,
in the fall
right?
to then be presented to town meeting as an adopted plan.
That sounds about right.
Makes sense.
Sounds good.
Nicely
Any other
done.
feedback?
Yes.
No other feedback. Before the LBAC meeting adjourned, I just wanted to indicate my appreciation, I'm sure everybody else in LBAC's appreciation to Mark for all your
thank you for
guidance
that.
and
That's really-
assistance over the years. We've had a few bumps in the road, but your assistance has been invaluable, and we really
I've
appreciate
enjoyed
it.
working with you, and you've done phenomenal work, and other members as well in LBAC, so appreciate
It's
that.
Mark's last light board meeting.
That is,
It
yeah,
is,
thank you,
wow.
thank you, Steve, that's really nice of you to say.
With that, I guess LBAC's role is done here, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for the input, and thank you
care,
for coming
gentlemen.
along.
Thanks for coming.
All right, so we have got two final items here. So the next is a discussion of distributed antenna deployment within town. Companies approach the town looking to place antenna attachments to poles, to light poles, and the goal is to discuss our town policy for use of our streetlights and the right-of-way for use of antennas. So over to you, Chris, for some more context on this one.
Sure. So, with the, so let's see, where to begin? Distributed antennas seem to be the preferred mechanism for wireless communication providers as we approach the 5G world. And so, there's a number of reasons behind that, some I think they're willing to admit, others they're not. But even looking out here, you can see your traditional cell antenna. But what they're finding is it's easier and more cost-effective from a wireless provider model to attach to wood poles in predominantly overhead areas, and then incorporate distributed small cell antennas with decorative streetlights in underground or urban areas. And so where that has become a problem from the distributed antenna developing world is when they get to municipal light plant territories. Because to put it in context, when you go, if you lived in a neighboring community served by Eversource, they come to an agreement with Eversource. Eversource puts a distributed antenna right outside your living room window, and no one can say anything about it. And Eversource makes money, and the antenna companies make money. You go to an MLP territory, where we have a greater connection to the community, we know Mrs. Jones isn't going to want to distribute antenna outside her bedroom. You know, we know there are EMF concerns. And so what they're finding is when they try and build out in MLP territories, they're not getting success. So they can build anywhere else because there really isn't that public involvement, but when you come here, there is. And so that's created some tension. This has been going on for several years. I'll say several, I'm not sure the exact number, but a little while. It started with 4G and perhaps even 3G. But, and so what has happened is they've tried to bring this to the federal level. And so they've tried to get the FCC to change rulings to essentially prohibit municipalities from denying developing rights to the antenna providers, so essentially allowing them to develop anywhere. And so with the change in administration in the presidency, the FCC did just that in 2018. But it's messy. You know, so what you would see is the antenna providers are trying to leverage the 2018 legislation to say we can do whatever we want. The states and municipalities are saying, no, you know, relax. And so we've come to this a little bit as what you see before us. And so we've been approached by Extenet, dating back to the fall, where they would like to put distributed antennas, a few of them in town. And, excuse me, and part of the problem also with that, and I've had several meetings with them, is these antenna providers are partnered with a company. So Extenet, I believe, is AT&T's partner. But then if you want to boost Verizon service, we're going to get another company that says, well, we want to put an antenna up for Verizon. So it's feasible to say, if a company allows this, or a town allows this, you could have one pole is AT&T, another wood pole is Verizon, another one's Sprint. And so it really could be a mess without the proper vetting procedure. And so that enter this where basically I had met with these folks and said, wood poles are a non-starter. We're looking at upgrading the infrastructure. We have areas that are could be moving to looking at underground, you know, and that's the other piece with underground conversions. It's just another item on the pole to have to try and repair, put up, get them to convert. If you want to convert it to underground, it's an operational mess. So, long story longer, they're really focusing on the Leonard Street area. And so there, it's less of a concern from a wood pole standpoint, but we have decorative lights. And so what they've done is, so I said, how about if you want to look at utilizing, so what's different from their letter to what was discussed is I had said, the existing street lights aren't, decorative lights aren't designed to support weights of antennas. So you'd have to replace it. And so with all that long-winded explanation, the point of that is to say, I don't think it would be a valid process to have them just replace a decorative street light with an antenna built into it and not tell anyone. And so that's where I had recommended they go through the grant of location process through Glenn's group to vet essentially placing an antenna.
Well, and this letter that we have from.
Sorry, from George.
Yeah, from council was that basically trying to work out a cooperative discussion between Extenet and the town light department to find a resolution to this, so.
Exactly.
And this was only March 15th. Because it sounds like Extenet was trying to say, you must give me
Yes.
permission, and town's saying, no, we don't.
Right.
Because we own the light department and we own the poles, and this is not a regulation, it's our pole. It's not the same thing. And that's George's, but I guess there's some case law to that effect.
Is this the law, the Telecommunications Act? Is that what that
The
law is?
telecommunications, that's what allows like cell phone tower companies to say, you can't say no to putting in a cell phone tower. All the zoning board of appeals can do is regulate the color. Like the one up by the cemetery, it's painted brown on the bottom, green in the middle, and blue at the top to match the
So
tree
is that
trunk, tree leaves, and sky.
new
You can't say
legislation,
no.
Adam, or is
No.
this-
1996. So you can't, otherwise you'd have no cell phone network, because everyone would say no, right? So the feds came in and said, you can't say no, you can just regulate how it looks. And in this case, they're saying, I guess George is saying, well, this is not the same thing. They're trying to say it is the same thing, therefore you must give me this power.
Oh, so-
And then George is saying, well, yeah, but this is different because the town owns the pole. It's a thing we own that you're trying to attach to. It's got nothing to do about you building a cell tower. You're trying to clip onto things.
Or having someone have
So
a
that's not
private,
the same thing.
private building or
But
something.
it does sound like there's
putting
some
in a
legislation.
cell antenna.
It does sound like there's some legislation that came through in the last year, though, that maybe provides them some additional rights to use.
That was their attempt. So there's obviously a counter movement to clarify or overturn that. But that goes back to pole attachments. And so through that pole ownership, we have the exemption to say who attaches and who doesn't. And
Yeah, that's I
historically,
think,
we've
the
said no.
distinction that they're drawing here. There's a case in 2018, and then this FCC regulation is September of 18. I don't know which came first.
Right.
But I guess George's point is that basically they're regulating something that's different, that us owning the pole, it's not the same thing.
So, but,
Building their own
can
tower
I ask a
somewhere.
question, I mean, because people complain all the time about cell service in our town, right? This would improve it?
For AT&T users.
And then you have Verizon and T-Mobile.
Well, but that's how it is with all the poles. People
Right.
clip onto them, you know.
And what we're saying is that you can't just come in and just put this on here, you need to have an agreement with us to do this.
Correct.
And they're saying you have to let us put it on there.
But are we saying, no, you can't put it on ever, or we just want to be part of the dialogue?
We're part of the dialogue and put it to a public process to vet the EMF concerns,
Yeah,
vet the
people are gonna-
aesthetics.
people-
Which there will be.
Yeah, people, I mean, you heard it before when we had the thing with the cell tower thing where, over in the church.
Yeah.
Where
From the
people are,
congregation.
are
Without
concerned they're all
question,
gonna get cancer. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's
But
a
I'm
valid
not-
concern.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the
We
question, I
can put
guess,
these
would
all over
be,
town, right?
well, you did this March 15th, this letter went out, have we heard a response?
I just,
I mean,
coincidentally.
it's only been, like a week, so.
I think there's an email on my phone for a meeting later in the week.
Right, so it may be premature to deal with it.
So, yeah, so with that in mind, can we kind of table this until you can have that conversation and pick it up?
Sure.
I'd move to lay this matter on the table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Interesting.
Thank you for working through it, Chris.
It's good that we need to be.
Appreciate it.
We need to be made aware.
I think it was smart to get George involved in that as well.
Yeah. Okay, with that then, final order of business is approval of minutes from February 25th.
They look fine to me.
Yeah, that looks good to me.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and with that, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
So you're done with the
light board's
whiteboard.
adjourned.